Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Good Talk, New Lines Magazine's first Instagram Live series of conversations. My name is Riada Akyol, and I'm very excited about inviting founder and CEO Jasminko Halilovic. He will be joining us, I believe, from Sarajevo, and he's waiting. So let me just connect. Jasminko, you have so many people who have patiently waited here. Hi, welcome, and thank you for joining us. I was just telling our followers here a little bit about the background, a little bit about the museum, how I know personally the story, how it opened in 2017, won the Council of Europe Museum Prize, and how you created something that from a local initiative grew into something that's a very respected, powerful platform internationally. Thank you for coming here. A lot of people are waving. I have to say this at the beginning of each live. The only reason why I'm going to turn off the waves is because we will post this conversation on YouTube afterwards. So there's no censor. It's just to make it less distracting for the video that will be posted afterwards. Thank you all. Jasminko, how are you? Where are you?
Hi, hello. I'm in Sarajevo. I just arrived to Sarajevo today, so good to be with you today, and thank you for inviting me.
No problem. Jasminko, I was just telling our audience here, I know the story behind the World Childhood Museum, but can you tell a little bit to those who are watching, how did you get that idea? How did it all come to be?
Yes, so the World Childhood Museum is the world's only museum which is exclusively focused on the experience of children affected by armed conflicts. The museum was opened, the permanent museum was opened 5 years ago, but actually the project is over 10 years old. And it all started as a book project, not as a museum project. My goal was to create a book about this experience. I created a website. I invited people to share their memories. More than 1,000 people responded. I created a book out of these very short memories, like tweets, like text messages, up to 160 characters per person. And during the work on the book, I met hundreds of these people, talked to them, and I understood that they tend to connect their memories to certain physical objects, personal belongings. And that's how the idea for the museum was born. So I understood there is a community around this topic. This community wants to tell their stories. There are no many platforms to do it. So yeah, I thought it would be great to have a museum as a physical space where we would continuously collect, document, and present these experiences.
And as I said, it grew from a local initiative to powerful international platform as well. I mean, you yourself are a child from wartime, or you spent part of your childhood in Sarajevo during the war from 92 to 95, but how did it grow internationally? And what kind of objects are featured in your exhibitions? From which conflicts or which countries do you have the collection pieces from?
Yes, so today the collection of the World Childhood Museum includes over 5,000 objects from 15, 16 different conflicts, including most of the contemporary conflicts like Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Ukraine. Obviously, we have an office there, but also conflicts from the 20th century, like the Bosnian War, Kosovo War, Second World War even. So it's a quite diverse collection, which is growing every day. And yeah, we really hope to build and to create the world's most significant collection on this topic. And already what we have is very unique. So yes, it's just to keep working and keep documenting these stories and experiences, because there are so many communities and people around the world who are affected by armed conflicts.
Yeah, and of course you're also very humble. You were elected as Forbes 30 under 30 two years ago, I believe, and that is just one more of many recognitions, personal but also professional, of your work and how you've grown this platform. And I know that, as you mentioned, the museum has a few offices. It has a branch office in Kyiv, in Ukraine, and your cooperation started in 2020. But from what I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, when World Childhood Museum opened their first office there. But I know you're very attached to Ukraine. I know that you've been very vocal since the start of the Russian invasion in February this year. that you have traveled there just before it started. How are you seeing the situation? How are you reacting to lack of understanding, or maybe the behavior of European Union's actors before? I know that you always talk about the countries at the edge of Europe. Sometimes you include Bosnia. How does it all seem from your perspective right now? And tell us about your employees there.
Yes, so we have an office in Kiev with around 10 people, and we have the collection there and an archive and traveling exhibition. Not yet permanent museum, but one day we'll have it. When all of this started, we managed to evacuate the collection and employees. And I agree with you. It's very disturbing to watch to see what's happening in Ukraine. Obviously, particularly from Bosnia, where we lived through something similar in the 1990s. At that time, one of the most frustrating things about the war in Bosnia was a lack of reaction from the international community. Now we see a bit of a different situation. We see Western world coming together, relatively united, I would say. Also relatively determined, maybe even surprisingly for many, and showing support for Ukraine in different ways and with different means. I think still more could be done. We do see gratitude from Ukraine for the support they receive, but also in the same time we have to every day remind ourselves that Ukraine is fighting the war which it did not want to fight, the war which it did not start or provoke in any way. There is zero responsibility on Ukraine, and they are fighting the second strongest military in the world, which attacked the completely independent country without any relevant reason. So in this sense, I think whatever support Ukraine receives, it deserves it. Of course, I would prefer if Bosnia also received similar support, but this is not relevant anymore. It's a thing which belongs in the past, and now it's just important to support Ukraine as much as we can, and however we can, everyone according to its own capacities and capabilities, not only countries and states, but also individuals and society.
And you did mention that you managed to evacuate some of the parts from the exhibition, from the office there. And I know it's very difficult to even think about it right now, but is anybody from your team working on trying to document the lived experiences of individuals or kids there, or provide help based on the experience that and the education and training that they've received so far? We were intensively documenting experiences in Ukraine since 2018, and particularly over the last 2 years since we have an office there. Currently, the focus is not on documentation, because the War Childhood Museum, we are not media, we are not pressured to do the live on-ground documentation of what's happening. We can always do it with some time distance, and for us this is a safer way to do it. Because when you work with children, in particularly in these sensitive circumstances, when children are traumatized, you want to be particularly careful as well. So insisting on doing it today instead of with some time delay, it wouldn't make too much sense for us. Although our researchers are still in the field, and it is an ongoing process, but the focus is now more on providing support to teachers and parents on how to talk with children about war, for example, and such things. Yeah, and we know that deliberately targeting cultural heritage site is international crime under the 1954 Hague Convention, and we've seen that Russia has targeted, specifically also destroyed museums, that it has targeted religious cultural sites, and I think UNESCO said that more than 100 cultural sites have been purposely targeted. You've also witnessed the destruction of cultural heritage yourself, even though you might not remember, or you've seen it in Bosnia. I know that you've worked hard on being vocal and raising awareness about it. Are these conversations about destruction of cultural heritage, museum from the conflicts, are these conversations being held at the conferences or gatherings of museum experts and conventions that you have visited?
Yes, since this started, obviously this is pretty present topic in museum community, not only regarding Ukraine, but also we have seen it in Afghanistan recently. We see it all over the world. One of the ways to attack a society, a community, is to attack its culture and its cultural heritage, and this is what we see in all major conflicts. Unfortunately, it's also repeated now in Ukraine. There is an ongoing conversation. There is a lot of support which museums from the rest of the world are trying to provide to colleagues in Ukraine. For example, we were also offered by a friendly museum in Warsaw in Poland to evacuate our collection there. We opted for a museum in Lviv in the end, but I want to say that there is support, there is awareness in the community, but there is not much what museum community or cultural community can do about this. This is very unfortunate because we remember it from Sarajevo, we remember it from all over Bosnia and Herzegovina as well. The National Library in Sarajevo is one of the symbols of the city, burning down with hundreds of thousands and maybe millions of books inside. So it is one of these particularly frustrating elements of conflicts. But still even difficult to focus on this when children are being killed, when civilians are being killed, people are being killed. So even to think about cultural heritage, you need to put special effort to do it. But yes, cultural heritage unfortunately also is attacked.
And one of the many amazing things about this museum and the platform that you've created is the international dimension of it, the solidarity that it can create, or the power of connection and empathy, and possibly healing, because healing is such a difficult process and a long-term one. So I'm curious, and I know that there was a project and you were working with partners about an exhibition of the experiences of Syrian children, child refugees living in Lebanon as well. Has that partnership come to fruition? What are the similarities maybe based on the experiences or uniquenesses of each of these projects that you deal with?
Yes, one of our first international projects was in Lebanon. We documented experiences of more than 100 Syrian child refugees there. And that was actually the first time we worked outside of Bosnia, and also the first time we worked with current children and youths, not former children and currently adults. So after this documentation and research project in the field, we did an exhibition about experience of Syrian child refugees. And this was also a good opportunity for the stories from different contexts and people of different backgrounds to connect between each other. It immediately demonstrated how powerful this can be. The feeling of belonging to a greater community is very important for our participants, for people who tell us their stories. It's supporting their own healing processes. And this is something what we heard, not only in Bosnia, Lebanon, Syria, but also in Ukraine and other places where we worked. So this is the experience of childhood affected by war is something that stays with people. And definitely there are many, while it is also unique for each individual, and it can be very different even for two sisters living under the same roof. There are also some patterns which can be established, in particularly when similar experience is shared. For example, a Syrian child refugee and a Ukrainian child refugee or Bosnian child refugee would have some similar dreams, hopes, fears, maybe. So you can find many of these similarities, but also it's always important to keep in mind that this is a very also very individual experience, and it depends on so many factors how a person will go through it.
Yeah, and your museum is growing both in terms of geographic scope and also thematically as well. I learned that you had campaigns like Children and Genocide, where you did a cooperation with Humans of Amsterdam, and that digital campaign and the connection to internet helped reach 11 million people online in 2020. And different campaigns kind of done in cooperation with survivors of sexual violence related to conflict in Bosnia. So I wanted to ask you though, something that I thought was very interesting is that within the exhibitions that you have and the projects, there was one about childhood and everyday life under totalitarian regimes and war. So how are these testimonies or objects from these different projects different, for example, I assume that those from that era, some objects might be different even in terms of technology, or I saw an interview where you talked about a Walkman, and how kids who today come as visitors were not even familiar what it was. What are the different kind of testimonies of history that you were putting out there?
Yeah, of course, there are specifics of each period in our history, and when you collect the objects from the Second World War, you cannot expect the same as when you collect today. What we see, for example, today is a high presence of digital objects. Children submit us videos and photos which they make with their smartphones as instead of maybe prints or something what we would collect before. If you are collecting from the Second World War, it's even difficult to collect photographs. If you are collecting from 1990s, you will have many photographs. But if you are collecting now, you will have many digital photographs and digital objects because everyone has a camera. So definitely you can trace some of these things. As you mentioned, the Walkman, for example, the new generation which comes for our workshops, they don't know what it is. They don't know what how do you play music with it. It's a more like a Spotify generation. So yes, it's also when you put all of these stories together, there are reminders of different time periods, and these reminders also can help you to put the story in the context, because you either see something what reminds you of your childhood, or you maybe see something what reminds you of your parent childhood, and something what you just heard about from stories. So for everyone, there is an opportunity to interact, an opportunity to self-identify or identify with the object and the story. And this is very interesting on so many levels. For example, we have a magic wand in the magic stick in our collection. And then when kids come who read the Harry Potter books and series, of course, for them, this is a reminder of this. And for someone in 1990s, it was not, because there was no Harry Potter. So yes, it's a very diverse collection, and you can make so many connections with all of these objects.
Yeah. But that also leads me to the question of responsibility as a museum. So I was curious, in what ways do you consciously think about this idea of preservation and description and all the related content that you mentioned as well? How the responsibility of both preserving and then exhibiting these objects in the future one day, and your role in it?
Yes, since creating the War Childhood Museum, I always had a couple of values, couple of foundational values, and strong determination to stick with them. What's very central to our work is dignity and integrity. If you want to collect personal stories and histories from people, and if you want to be this platform where these stories will be told to the world and to different audiences, definitely you need to think about those two things, because it's a multi-way process. It's not only expected from those who share stories, it's also expected from those who come to learn. Visitors trust in museums, and they have high expectations, and they want to know when they enter this space that this is a space where information will be presented as it is. And that's why integrity is so important. And dignity, on the other hand, because when people come and tell you their story, or give you their personal belonging, which reminds them of their childhood, they don't want others to come to this museum to be sad about it, or to pity them. They want to share their story with dignity, and you need to keep this in mind. And I think this is a big success of the War Childhood Museum, that when visitors come to the museum, what is inspired is not a pity, it's a respect towards these experiences and these people who told them and who told these stories. So by inspiring respect, by preserving some hope, by preserving the dignity of participants, I think the museum is in that way playing a responsible role as a bridge between participants and visitors who come to learn about their stories.
That sounds very powerful. And when we speak about these exhibitions, I know that they're both permanent and traveling exhibitions as well, which allows a lot of people around the world to be able to see it. And I know that it's important to say that the museum also works on workshops for teachers and parents that focuses both on training and allowing the opportunity to, in a professional way, offer resources for discussions on sensitive topics related to conflict and war childhood, obviously. I saw a moving invitation on your website, which I want to share here with the viewers, where it stated that those who see it, if their childhood was affected by war, can contribute their memories. So that we keep raising awareness of it. What are you looking for? Are there specific sets that are cited there? And are you getting some responses from around the world, not necessarily in your core geographical scope or core?
Yes, as I already mentioned, the collection is very diverse, both in terms of what kind of objects we have and also in terms of geographical coverage. This is an ongoing open call and an ongoing activity of the museum, the further documentation and of this experience. And everyone who feels that their childhood is affected is welcome, of course, to share their story with the museum and to make it a part of the collection. And this does not mean that you necessarily lived through the war or you experienced the war firsthand. It's also, let's say, children of war veterans, because even though maybe they did not witness war or live through war, their childhood has been affected by this distant conflict. If their parents went to fight, maybe they didn't come back, maybe they came as different person, or they just missed them while they were not there, so their childhood was obviously affected. So this is hundreds of millions of people around the world whose childhoods have been affected by different armed conflict. It's a huge community, and we will keep building this platform to serve this community. And while we are still a relatively small organization, we are growing and expanding, and one day we want to be big enough to serve all those whose childhood have been affected and who want to be part of the museum in some way.
That was a really important reminder of how so many different situations can impact a person, and that when we speak about war childhood, it's not just one meaning and one experience that can define it. I know that you're very busy. I'm curious, what are you working on right now, or is there anything specific that you are not necessarily particularly excited about, because I know that you're excited about everything that you work on. Is there anything that's very different or maybe innovative in terms of the projects that the museum is engaged in right now?
Yeah, there are many things. One of the things which is very important for us and will be crucial in the next period is opening permanent museum in Kyiv. We want to go back in Kyiv as soon as it is possible, as soon as it is safe. It will be I hope, very soon. And we want to open a permanent museum there. This is the decision which we made together with our friends from Ukraine, with our colleagues, and this is something that community there will expect from us. So we want to deliver. Speaking of innovation, we recently won quite a substantial EU grant for innovation, over 3 million euros to produce a video game based on our collection. So this will be a 3-year project with 9 partners, including 2 other museums. And the result of the project will be 3 video games for these 3 museums, including the War Childhood Museum. We will first year will be research and conceptualization. So we still don't know what kind of game this will be and for which platforms, but we will probably try to focus on education gaming and to try to produce one more tool which we can use in schools. We extensively work with schools, with thousands of children annually. We want to make this millions of children annually globally. We are currently working on that, so that video game might be one of our tools to expand some of our peace education programs. There are many more things we are working on. We are currently negotiating several series of traveling exhibitions, mainly around Europe still, but hopefully around US as well soon. So yeah, many things.
That's really amazing, because we've seen so many articles and essays recently about the power specifically of video games, both in radicalization and recruitment and far right, and even some very disturbing, portrayals and scenes from wars. I know even that I think Bosnian War was somewhere included in one of the games. So to use it in this way that you will hopefully deliver, as you say, is really powerful, and it shows how that innovation can go in different ways, from museums to entrepreneurs and companies. So that's something to really look forward to in terms of following. Jasminko, I know that you do a lot of interviews. I don't know, have you ever specifically thought about this, but I was curious to learn. How do you think that working for and through this platform of War Childhood Museum has changed you personally, beyond the obvious growth and maturity and the fact that we're all growing old with time? I'm sure you've gained a lot of professional insights, but have you ever thought about how you have changed, how this changed you?
Yeah, I thought about it several times. I think the work, the last 10 years of working to develop this from the small book idea to an international organization and museum has had a profound impact on me, on every single aspect of me as a person, as human being. I come from a different sector, and before this I was in business, and I never thought I would end up in a non-for-profit world working on this kind of a project where the impact is the only focus you have. But I do feel privileged. I think this is a mission which is worth of devoting life to it. I also feel very much privileged to be able to represent so many diverse communities that put their trust into this institution, which we developed and created from scratch. The museum gave me so much in terms of exposure to. I met so many amazing people. I learned about different experiences, and I feel much richer. And I feel enriched as a person. Before the museum, honestly, I lived in kind of a bubble. I mean, I still do, as we all do to some extent, but exposure, which museum brought me, changed me forever, and I can never be the same, and I'm grateful so much for this. And I'm also grateful for the people who devoted their lives to the museum besides me, and who keep working tirelessly to make this happen. And trust me, making an international organization or internationally relevant institution from a country like Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is marginal on any level you can imagine, a small, developing world, outside European Union, fragile democracy, like so many challenges. To do it from here, that's not the usual direction. Usually we have organizations coming from the Western world to countries like Bosnia to work, and that's much easier. You can employ 10 people in Bosnia for one decent US salary, but to employ people in US as a Bosnian organization, this is a challenge. And this is an uphill battle which we are fighting. But I'm confident that the War Childhood Museum will become an international platform and will serve all of these communities. And I'm confident that everyone who worked on it, including myself, will be very proud one day.
I know that there are a lot of people who are really appreciative of everything you've done, and you've just reminded us throughout this conversation about the sheer vastness of the experiences and the numbers of children and adults who have been touched or who have had experiences from war. Thank you for joining us today. I know that you are off to your travel and new conferences next week. I think when we were trying to schedule this, we were trying to find the date. I said at the beginning of this conversation, we have statistics which are sometimes important to just understand. More than 177.7 million kids would need humanitarian assistance as of January this year, before the Russian invasion of Ukraine started, meaning at least 7 more million kids just because of political instability and conflict. It just shows how important it is to talk about this. And Museum of War Child Experience is an incredible, powerful platform. I look forward to following your work. I hope that people who listen to this will go and maybe contribute. And you've told us about the impact that you've learned and how it helps heal the communities and raise awareness. Thank you so much for joining us at New Lines Magazine's Good Talk Instagram Live series, Jasminko.
Thank you for having me, and let's be in touch and follow how the museum develops. I'm sure it will be an exciting journey.
Yes, and I will look for that game, because I know that with 3 boys in my house, I would much rather them play that video game than some others that I have to sometimes put a limit to. I appreciate it, Jasminko, and thank you to all of you who have joined us and stayed patiently at the beginning while we connected. You know, we are going to be here next Wednesday as well. Stay connected for more conversation with people from all over the globe. Bye. Have a good day.